This is Valley Public Radio. I'm David Alse. Welcome to Young Artist Spotlight. In this program, we'll be featuring a talented pianist from Bakersfield, Alexander Leung. He's a freshman at Frontier High School. He studies privately with Bonnie Ferrer. He'll perform music of Bach, Beethoven, Schumann, and Bartók. Support for Young Artist Spotlight comes from the Bonner Family Foundation and from the California Arts Council's Arts and Public Media Grant. Let's get to the music. It's Young Artist Spotlight, and our guest performer today is a pianist from Bakersfield, Alexander Leung. Alexander, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Hi,
So, Alexander, how old are you? What grade are you in? Where do you go to school?
I am 15. I go to Frontier High School and I'm a freshman.
All right. And you've been playing piano for quite a while now. How old were you when you started piano?
Around 7 years old.
Okay, very good. And who's your piano teacher now, and how long have you been studying with this teacher?
Miss Bonnie Ferrer, and I've been with her for 3 years.
All right, very good. Bonnie Ferrer, known to our audience as a wonderful classical pianist and instructor. And you, like many of her students, participate in the Scaled Certificate of Merit program for piano achievement. And you've just completed which level?
Level 8.
Okay, very good. Now, this past year, of course, been very different for all kinds of musicians because we have to do everything in socially distanced fashion. So rather than doing live performance, you submitted recordings of the four pieces you did for level 8 competency. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I know in level 8, there's also a sight reading portion where you're presented with a piece of music. You have a brief time to kind of look it over and then do your best to execute everything that's on the manuscript. How do they do that because they can't send it to you beforehand and have you do a recording of a sight read piece because you could take all the time in the world to study it, master it. So how do they deal with that this year so that they make sure that it's really a true test of your sight reading skills?
They gave us around 2 minutes to look at the piece and play it.
Okay, so they just put it on you looked at it on computer screen and then look at it and play
Yeah,
it?
they sent us a link for 2 minutes.
Okay, wow. What was that like?
A little stressful.
I can imagine. Sight reading in itself is stressful, but then to even do it like that, even more so. Do you play other instruments besides the piano?
Yeah, I have played the violin for around 7 to 6 years.
Okay, and who's your violin teacher?
Marcy Manyard.
All right. So we've had another pianist on who also plays violin, and she had some thoughts about kind of playing one instrument versus the other. I'm wondering, is your approach to violin any different than piano? What do you do when you're playing piano, and what do you do when you're playing violin?
Piano, to me, it's more like getting the right tempo and playing the right notes. But violin is more of getting the notes in the right pitch because I'm kind of out of tune sometimes.
Okay, well, intonation, of course, is the big challenge of the violin. Yeah, it really, really is. Do you have a favorite piece to play on violin?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. How about on piano? Of all that you've been playing for like 9 years plus now, you have a favorite piece to play on piano?
No.
No. So all you're playing, it sounds like you're just kind of down to business. All the playing you do is really for whatever teacher's telling you to play and stuff you have to work on for competition.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very good. Well, in Certificate of Merit, of course, each year pianists work on a number of different pieces across the centuries. And I think you've got 4 pieces that you performed this year and did recordings of, and that's what we'll be listening to on Young Artist Spotlight. And we'll take these in the order in which they were composed, in which they were written. First is from one of the great keyboardists ever and one of the greatest composers for keyboard ever, and also just one of the greatest composers ever, Johann Sebastian Bach. From 1723, or so it is guessed, Bach had a well-known set of inventions, and we're going to be hearing the first one from you, BWV 772, first invention in C major by Bach. Tell me about preparing this piece and what you like about it.
I just played it because my teacher gave it to me. I don't really have any like
No emotional attachment to it?
no, not really.
No. What's the most important thing to you in getting Bach right on the keyboard?
I guess the trills.
Yeah, all those trills and mordants and flims and flams and all that stuff, they're, of course, an important part of the Baroque keyboard language. Okay, so we'll listen now as Alexander Leung performs the first invention by Bach in C major on Young Artist Spotlight. You're listening to Young Artist Spotlight on Valley Public Radio. That was today's guest artist, pianist Alexander Leung. He's from Bakersfield. He was performing the first invention by Bach in C major, BWV 772, music from the 1720s, probably 1723. From there, we move forward in time about 80 years to one of the most famous and most beloved pieces in the solo piano literature. Hear from another master pianist and master composer for the keyboard and just master composer as well, Ludwig van Beethoven. We're talking about Piano Sonata number 14, also known as the Moonlight Sonata. So what do you work on when you're preparing Moonlight Sonata? It's such a well-known piece.
I guess not trying to fall asleep because it's really slow.
Got you. So do you prefer to play things fast?
Yeah.
That's lots of young players like to go fast, so that's very, very natural. For Certificate of Merit, I know you played the first movement, right? There are two other movements. Have you done any work on the other two movements in Moonlight Sonata?
Not that I know.
Well, if you like to play fast, check them out, because the second movement is a fun little waltz, and then the third movement is a real barn burner. So if you like to go fast, third movement will be a great one for you. How long did it take you to prepare Moonlight Sonata?
Around 3 to 6 months.
Now, another thing in Certificate of Merit, you must perform everything from memory, right? You're not reading music while you're playing. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, there's 4 pieces that we have to play, and 2 have to be memorized.
Okay.
But the other 2, we have a choice.
Out of the 4, you get to choose which 2 you are still able to read and which 2 you have to do from memory. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good amount of time to work on this piece, but it's worth it because there's so much in it. Was it the memorization that took the longest part, or really just crafting the whole song, would you say?
The memorization.
So what's your approach to memorizing a piece?
Just find patterns and memorize the dynamics mostly.
Okay. Very, very good. So when I was growing up and taking piano lessons, mostly I relied on just maybe hearing my teacher play it, but beyond that, just reading the sheet music and playing it and figuring out what to do with it. And then every once in a while, maybe if my parents had a recording in their vinyl collection, I would listen to a piece, but mostly didn't listen to a piece. Now, with the internet, you can go online and within 5 seconds call up 100 different recordings of musicians great pianists, world-class pianists performing the piece that you're working on. Do you ever do that as part of your preparation?
Yeah, I listen to it first, like before I look at the sheet music.
That's very good. That's really, really helpful. If you get a mental imprint of how it goes. Did you remember in listening to it, did you just kind of go out and look at any person playing it in particular, or did you remember looking for or listening to particular pianists performing this piece?
No, I just looked on YouTube.
That's what most of my students do anyway. So I always ask them, hey, next week when you go and listen to it, come back and tell me who you actually listened to playing. Well, let's listen now as pianist Alexander Leung performs Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, music from 1801. We'll hear the first movement. That was pianist Alexander Leung performing the first movement of Beethoven's Piano Sonata Number 14, more well known as the Moonlight Sonata. Alexander, that was really nice to hear you play that piece. I'm glad you didn't fall asleep while you were playing it. It is it's one of the reasons people love it so much, because it's calming and soothing and so beautiful. From Beethoven now, we move forward a handful of decades deeper into the Romantic era. Robert Schumann with work Opus 15, Kinderszenen, Scenes from Childhood. One of the Schumann's best known pieces of all, and one of his best known piano pieces, of course, is part of this Opus 15. It's the number 7 movement, Traumerei, a beloved piece, and really just one of those gorgeous pieces, and it makes it so beloved. You worked on this year for a Certificate of Merit, the very first one, from Fundum Ländern und Menschen, of foreign lands and people. This is a quick little piece. What are you working on in preparing this Schumann piece?
Making sure that the right hand notes have a bigger imprint than the left hand notes.
Okay, because the right hand carries the melody, right? As we get into Romantic era, we can have like a longer and even bigger emphasis on melodies and melodies that sing and things like that, and a lots more legato playing. And then, and because of the advances in keyboard technology, the changes in the piano, pedal comes into play more. A lot of students struggle with pedal. What kinds of things do you do to work on your pedal technique?
I just listen to what my teacher has to say.
Okay, very good. Very good. I'm curious too, in practicing your pieces and working on them, do you ever record yourself playing while you're working on a piece and listen back to hear kind of if you're actually doing what you think you're doing while you're playing?
Yeah, sometimes I get my grandma too.
Okay, cool. That's a really, really good practice technique. I know I do it myself. It's one of those kind of funny things about how the brain works when we're creating music. We're spending all of our minds computing power on just making sure am I playing the right notes and all that. We have very little processing power left over to really actually hear and feel if we're actually doing those things with expression that we think that we're doing. What do you like about this Schumann piece that you did?
It just like flows nice, and it's just like it's only 1 page long, so it's
so
the
it's
easiest.
so it's short. Yeah, I was going
Yeah,
to say, what do you like besides the fact that it's one of the shortest ones? Yeah, it is just a yeah, it's just a really really enchanting little piece. So we'll listen now as Alexander Leung performs music of Robert Schumann on Young Artist Spotlight on Valley Public Radio. From Schumann, from Kinderszenen, Scenes from Childhood, Opus 15, we'll hear the first movement of Foreign Lands and People. You're listening to Young Artist Spotlight on Valley Public Radio. I'm David Ouse, your host. Our guest artist today is a pianist from Bakersfield, Alexander Leung. He's 15 years old and freshman at Frontier High School in Bakersfield. And we just heard him performing music of Robert Schumann from Scenes of Childhood, Opus 15. We heard the first movement of Foreign Lands and People. Alexander, you've been studying with Bonnie Ferrer for 3 years now. I know she, gives you input on all the individual pieces that you're playing as you're working on them. But let's kind of back up, take a bigger view of your time with her. What are kind of bigger lessons in musicianship that you've taken away from Bonnie Ferrer?
That you shouldn't rush and play dynamics whenever you can see them.
Yeah. What makes dynamics important in music?
It gives the music a more lyrical and less robotic tone.
Yeah, exactly. If we're going to play without dynamics, right, we might as well just plug the notes into a computer and just let a computer spit them out of a synthesized thing. Yeah. I constantly remind myself dynamics are what, especially for piano too, because piano at root is a percussive instrument. It's a percussion instrument. It makes noise by hitting things. So one of the things we're constantly striving for in piano is how to take this percussion instrument and really make it sing, emulate the human voice. So to make smooth phrases, that's why we work in legato technique and changes in dynamics. Because, I'm sure you've had teachers in school who just talk in a monotone and at the same level and all that. What happens when you hear that, right? After 5 seconds, you zone out. This is boring. So yeah. When we're in conversation, we use dynamics in human speech. And so we use that to bring it to life. So from the easiest piece in your 4 pieces for this year's Certificate of Merit, we turn to what in its own way, even though it's short, could be one of the most technically challenging, the Bartók piece. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. So 1 minute of perhaps sheer terror for the performing musician. So from Schumann, we're moving forward another 8-9 decades to 1915, when Bartók wrote a suite of Romanian folk dances. There are 6 in the suite. This is the 6th one. This started as piano music, and then 2 years later, in 1917, Bartók orchestrated it for a small ensemble. Yeah, so let's talk to me about, 80 years ahead after the Schumann, music has changed a bit, hasn't it? And particularly with Bartók. What's striking? Compare this one to kind of the Schumann piece.
It's about triple the tempo, and there's a lot more dynamics.
Yep. It is very, very fast. How about the notes themselves? Are there harmonic surprises in there for you as well?
Yeah, there are, because there's a lot
Okay.
of sparse on those.
Okay. How long did it take you to prepare this one?
6 months.
Yeah, I can imagine. There's a lot going on in this piece. Let me ask you this, in particular in competition and for Certificate of Merit, a piece will have, some pieces actually come with a metronome marking on them. Others will just use an Italian term for speed. On the score, what's the tempo marking for this one?
132 beats per minute.
Okay. Now, was that on Bartók's original score, do you know, or in Certificate of Merit, do they help you identify your metronome mark?
I don't know. It's just on the piece.
Okay. Now, when you started preparing this piece, you didn't play it at that tempo, did you?
No, I played at around 50.
Yeah, that's a really, really good approach. Are there big leaps in the hand for this one?
Slightly during the end.
It's an exciting piece and a great way to round out your performance today on Young Artist Spotlight. Here's Alexander Leung from Bakersfield performing music of Bela Bartók from 1915, Romanian folk dance number 6. That was Alexander Leung performing Bela Bartók's Romanian folk dance number 6. That's from 1915 by Bartók. And the fourth of pieces that Alexander performed this year as part of level 8 of the Piano Certificate of Merit. Alexander, thanks so much for joining us today. It's a real treat to hear your music.
You're welcome.
What role do you see music playing in your life as you move forward?
I think I see it as a way to relax and just like it's kind of fun when you gather your friends and like create music.
So do you make music on ensembles, either formally or informally?
I attended band in 7th and 8th grade.
Okay, cool. Do you ever sit down and play just for fun, or when you sit down to play, is it always just working on whatever pieces you're working on for lessons?
It's just whatever I'm told to do.
Okay, well, that's a good, honest answer. Well, thanks so much for joining us on Young Artist Spotlight. I sure appreciate it. Alexander Leung. That concludes another episode of Young Artist Spotlight. Thank you to our wonderful performer today, pianist Alexander Leung from Bakersfield. Thanks also to his private instructor, Bonnie Ferrer. Special thanks to CMAC for video production. Support for Young Artist Spotlight comes from the Bonner Family Foundation and from the California Arts Council's Arts and Public Media Grant. For Valley Public Radio, I'm David Alls.